If you know anything about Metroid, you'll recognise Samus, the series' main character. But you might be surprised to learn that originally she was going to appear in Super Metroid completely naked. Like, no clothes at all. It seems very un-Nintendo, I know, but I promise it's 100% true. Let me tell you about the time that Samus was naked in Metroid. It all begins with Metroid 1 for the NES. A small team of developers at Nintendo had put together this explory kind of prototype game. They designed the main character, too, a mysterious figure wearing full body armor called Samus. And that's when they had an idea. You see, at the time, even more so than today, the world of video games was targeted almost entirely toward dudes. And so, most players of Metroid would likely assume the main character was some kind of burly muscle man. But the team wanted to surprise players completely. And so, at the very end of the game, if you completed Metroid fast enough, Samus would remove the helmet, revealing the fact that she was actually a woman all along. Now, that in and of itself would have been pretty forward-thinking for the time. But the team didn't stop there. If you completed the game even faster, Samus would take off her armor completely, revealing a sort of body-fitting suit. Fine, I guess. But if you completed Metroid in less than 1 hour, then Samus would remove even more layers, stripping down to just her bra and knickers. In other words, the faster players finished the game, the more clothes Samus would remove. Yikes. But the game was finished and released, scantily clad Samus included. And to Nintendo's surprise, it proved to be a bit of a hit. But little did the developers know that their decision to display Samus in just her bra would have some pretty major consequences down the line. You see, a few years later, that very same group of developers was reunited to work on a new Metroid game, this time for the SNES. The game's director, a guy called Yoshio Sakamoto, wanted to take advantage of the fancy new graphics they now had access to. His aim was to make the game look like a movie. Certainly ambitious. And so the game had these beautifully drawn backgrounds and brilliantly gruesome looking enemies. The animations, too, would have to be silky smooth and full of life. Which is when artist Toru Osawa, the guy in charge of Samus's animation, had an idea. As a sort of callback to Metroid 1, when Samus died in this new game, Osawa wanted her suit to shatter into pieces, revealing her true identity hidden inside. Now, that is, I think, a pretty cool idea. Comparing this animation to the scene at the end of the original Metroid, this one feels a lot more artful, at least to me. Except, Toru Osawa didn't want to stop there. Oh no, he was gonna take things a step further. In Metroid 1, Samus was shown in just a bra and underwear, right? Well, this time, he wanted her to be completely naked. So, here's the deal. Most of this original dying animation was completely identical to the one that ended up in the final game. That's the one I'm showing on screen, by the way. But for just one single frame of this original animation, Samus was completely naked. As Osawa said in an interview, there was a subliminal effect for just an instant when you could see her naked for one frame. Now, that's already bad enough. But things actually went downhill from there. The game's composer, Minako Hamano, as the only woman on the team, was asked to be the voice of Samus. The game didn't exactly have a Hollywood budget, after all. And so, Hamano was brought into the recording studio, and she went through and voiced a bunch of the game's different sound effects. But in her own words, when we sampled in front of the mic, I spoke a number of lines. I wasn't any good and completely failed. Now, I wouldn't go as far as completely failed, but there was one sound effect that proved to be extremely troublesome. It was none other than the one that played when Samus dies. The problem was, it kept sounding far too sexual. Of course, it wasn't on purpose, but something about the breathy tones just sounded kinda racy. And that, combined with the frame of Samus without any clothes on, was just way too much to go in the final game. The director, Yoshio Sakamoto, said this: "Samus was only naked for 1 second out of 60 minutes. However, when we stopped and thought about it for a moment, we had to stop, because this sort of thing is terrible in America." So, the team ended up removing this animation, and the sound effect too. Not because of some moral epiphany though, but because they worried that America might not approve of sexual Samus. So, what happened to the original sound effect and the animation of Samus completely naked? Well, unsurprisingly, they never made it out of Nintendo's headquarters. But just because I can't show you them doesn't mean they don't still exist. Because it turns out that Yoshio Sakamoto actually had a prototype version of the game's ROM made, with both naked Samus and the accompanying sound effect still included. He said, "I have a special version of the ROM with that in there," which sounds kind of creepy, to be honest. But that means just one thing. Unless Sakamoto has since thrown away that ROM, then somewhere out there still exists this lost artifact. And perhaps one day it will resurface. You never know. But until then, you'll just have to imagine it. You pervert. Hey, thanks for watching. You can follow me on Twitter at ThomasGdocs if you want to see some of my spicy gaming hot takes. Either way, I'll see you in the next video. Bye!